I had 60 seconds before the creme brulee arrived and the sniper across the street turned his white collar red. My hand trembled as I gripped the bottle of San Pellegrino, the condensation making my palms slick. The folded napkin in my vest pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds, like it might burn through the fabric before I could deliver it. Around me, the onyx room breathed with the quiet arrogance of old money, the whisper of Italian leather against mahogany, the crystalline ping of baccarat stemware, hushed conversations about summer homes in the Hamptons. Outside, Manhattan's February rain streaked the windows in silver rivulets. But in here, everything was warm, controlled, hermetically sealed from the reality of the streets below. I approached table 12 like I was approaching a minefield. Mark Snyder sat facing the dining room, his back to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked 57th Street. He had the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. Broad shoulders filling out a charcoal Brioni suit, salt and pepper hair cut military precise, hands that looked like they could break bone resting calmly on either side of his menu. His eyes scanned the wine list with the same focus other men brought to balance sheets. This was a man who controlled half of Manhattan's underground, and he looked like he belonged here, legitimate, powerful, untouchable. Beside him, an I-ho scrolled through her phone with practiced disinterest. She was beautiful in that expensive, cultivated way. Sleek black hair falling like a curtain of silk, a burgundy dress that probably cost more than I'd make in 6 months, diamond studs catching the amber glow of the Edison bulbs overhead. Her manicured fingers moved across the screen with the boredom of someone waiting for something more interesting to happen. She looked like a woman tolerating her fiancé's business dinner. She wasn't. 12 minutes ago, I'd heard her order his execution. The wine cellar at the Onyx Room wasn't really a cellar. It was a climate-controlled vault on the lower level, all exposed brick and Edison lighting that made the bottles look like artifacts in a museum. I'd been sent down to retrieve a 2009 Barolo for Table 6, navigating the narrow aisles between Burgundies and Super Tuscans, when I heard the voice. Female. Low. Speaking rapid Mandarin. I froze between the Chateau Margaux and the penfolds, my fingers still wrapped around the bottle I'd been reaching for. Ta zai sure how joisi. Cao chuang hu. He's at table 12. By the window. My Mandarin wasn't native, but it was good enough. 3 years embedded with a joint task force in Macau during my military days had given me more than just tactical skills. It had given me languages, the ability to disappear into crowds, to listen when people assumed I couldn't understand. Women Juanbei Haole. Iji Zai Juba. Liang Ji Zai Chufang Fujin. We're ready. 1 at the bar, 2 near the kitchen. The air in the cellar, kept at exactly 58 degrees, suddenly felt arctic. Ta Dien Tianpin de Shirho. Ganjing Li Luo. When he orders dessert. Clean and quick. I should have announced myself, cleared my throat, made my presence known like a professional. Instead, I pressed myself against the wine rack, the bottles cold against my spine, and listened to her confirm a murder with the same casual tone someone might use to confirm a dinner reservation. She switched to Cantonese then, faster and sharper, words I caught fragments of: sniper, rooftop, east side. And then numbers. Time. 2200 hours. 10 p.m. Heels clicked against the concrete floor, moving toward the stairs. I shrank deeper into the shadows, praying the dim lighting and rows of vintage bottles would hide me. Through the gaps, I caught a glimpse of her. Tall, elegant, burgundy dress catching the light like spilled wine. And I-ho, the woman currently sitting at table 12, playing the role of devoted fiancée to the man she'd just sentenced to death. She disappeared up the stairs, trailing a wake of jasmine perfume that now smelled like a funeral arrangement. I stood there for 10 seconds, 15, 20, waiting for my lungs to remember how to work. When I finally climbed back to the main floor, Barolo forgotten, my brain was cataloging everything I'd heard with the tactical precision I thought I'd left behind in Sao Paulo. Table 12 by the window, 1 at the bar, 2 near the kitchen, sniper on the east rooftop. When he orders dessert. I stepped back onto the dining room floor and everything snapped into focus with surgical clarity. Table 12, corner booth, premium real estate with a view of the city lights. Mark Snyder and I-ho, Manhattan's most unexpected power couple. He was American Mafia, old guard, the kind of operator who'd turned organized crime into an empire. She was triad-connected, Hong Kong elite, their engagement a political alliance that had been tabloid gold for months. A merger disguised as romance. Or a takeover disguised as both. I scanned the restaurant with new eyes, my serving tray pressed against my ribs like body armor. One man at the bar, early 40s, navy suit, nursing a Macallan he hadn't actually sipped in 30 minutes. He wasn't watching the Knicks game on the television. He was watching table 12. Two men near the kitchen entrance. They'd occupied that corner booth for 20 minutes. Menus open, water glasses full, never ordering. Both had their jackets buttoned despite the warmth of the room. One kept his hand near his waist. My heart slammed against my sternum hard enough to crack ribs. I looked back at table 12 at Mark Snyder, laughing at something Ho said, completely unaware that the woman touching his forearm had choreographed his death down to the minute. That in less than an hour, when the dessert course arrived and the dining room's attention was on the tableside flambe preparation, four professionals were going to put bullets in him while a fifth took the shot from across the street. I could walk away, clock out early, say I felt sick. Let whatever was about to happen just happen. Men like Mark Snyder didn't end up in this world by accident. He'd earned enemies. Maybe he'd earned this. But then I thought about my sister, Lucia, waiting tables in Rio while raising her two kids alone, counting on the money I sent home every month. I thought about every commander who'd trusted me with their life, every civilian I'd pulled from crossfire in Bogota when I was still wearing the uniform. I thought about the oath I'd taken, the one that didn't expire just because I'd crossed borders illegally and traded my rifle for a corkscrew. I thought, I can't just let someone die. So I grabbed a napkin from my station, pulled the ballpoint pen from my vest pocket, and wrote 10 words that would either save his life or end mine. My reflection in the polished silver looked corpse pale as I made my way to table 12. Each step felt like walking through concrete, time stretching and compressing. I was hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of my uniform collar, the squeak of leather soles on marble, the way Ho's laugh sounded like ice cracking. "You're San Pellegrino, sir." My voice came out steady, professional, like I hadn't just overheard a hit order, like my pulse wasn't hammering at 140 beats per minute. I set the bottle down on the white tablecloth, condensation already forming a ring, and poured his glass with the precision they drilled into us during training. Water, not blood. Civilian life, not combat. And then I did the thing every server is trained never to do. I touched him. My hand brushed against his as I slid the folded napkin beneath his wine glass. The contact lasted maybe half a second, a violation of every boundary between his world and mine, between the powerful and the invisible. Mark Snyder's eyes snapped to mine. They were glacier blue, colder than I expected, not cruel but calculating. The kind of eyes that had seen men beg and die and never flinched. His gaze held mine for a beat too long, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not fear exactly, but recognition, like looking at a predator deciding whether you're prey or competition. "Read it," I mouthed. "Please." His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, palm covering the napkin completely. "Is there something wrong with the service, darling?" Ho's voice sliced through the moment, honeyed and venomous. Mark's expression didn't change. He lifted his water glass, took a slow sip, and with his other hand, unfolded the napkin beneath the table where Ho couldn't see. I stood there, tray clutched to my chest, watching his face for any reaction. Nothing. Not a flicker, not a flinch. Just those ice-blue eyes scanning the 10 words. "Your fiancée sold you out. They're in position. East roof." Then his jaw tightened, imperceptible unless you were trained to read micro-expressions. The smallest tell. He knew. Mark set his glass down with a soft clink that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. When he spoke, his voice was velvet over steel, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "I'd like to switch seats." Ho blinked, her smile faltering. "What?" "The view." He gestured toward the window. "You always say you love watching the city at night. I want you to have the better view, sweetheart." "I'm fine where I am, Mark." "I insist." It wasn't a request. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. And Iho's laugh came out forced, brittle. That's sweet, but I prefer this side. The light is better for. Then we have a problem. Mark leaned back, his hand disappearing beneath the table. Because I'm moving either way, and it would be a shame if you were sitting in the wrong seat when I do. The silence stretched taut. I stood frozen, watching an Iho's face cycle through emotions. Confusion, irritation, fear, before settling on something carefully blank. Fine. She stood with fluid grace, diamonds catching the light as she moved. If it matters that much to you. They switched seats, Mark now facing the window, his back to the dining room, and Iho where he'd been. And that's when Mark looked directly at me. Really looked at me, for the first time, taking in my name tag, my face, the combat readiness I couldn't quite hide beneath the server's uniform. Arthur Santos, he read slowly, his pronunciation perfect. Tell me, Arthur, do you believe in second chances? My throat closed. I'm not sure, sir. I didn't either. He reached for his menu, flipping it closed with deliberate finality. Until 60 seconds ago. And Iho's face went white. And that's when I realized I'd just started a war. The world moved in slow motion and double time all at once. Mark Snyder sat in an Iho's former seat, his back now to the dining room, facing the window that overlooked 57th Street. The city glittered beyond the glass like a galaxy of broken promises. I should have walked away, returned to my station, let professionals handle professional problems. Instead, I found myself refilling water glasses at the adjacent table, close enough to hear, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. And Iho's fingers drummed against the tablecloth, her nails clicking in a regular rhythm that sounded like Morse code for panic. You're being paranoid, Mark. It's just a seat. Humor me. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd stopped asking permission years ago. I watched from my peripheral vision as his hand moved beneath the table, checking something. A weapon, probably. Men like Mark Snyder didn't survive in his world by trusting the kindness of strangers or fiancés. Across the dining room, the man at the bar shifted position. The two near the kitchen stood, one reaching for his phone. Not calling. Signaling. My training kicked in before conscious thought could stop it. I calculated angles, sight lines, exit routes. The east-facing window behind Mark's original seat. Distance to the building across the street, maybe 80 meters. Easy shot for anyone with basic sniper training. The dessert course was scheduled for 10 p.m. I glanced at my watch. 9:58. 2 minutes. Arthur. Mark's voice cut through my tactical assessment. Bring me the check. We're leaving. And Iho's perfectly composed mask cracked. We haven't had dessert. I've lost my appetite. Mark, you're embarrassing me. The first shot didn't make the sound you'd expect. No dramatic bang. Just the sudden spiderweb fracture of ballistic glass and an Iho's scream as the window exploded inward. Mark moved with the fluid violence of someone who'd been shot at before, his hand slamming the table edge up and forward. 70 pounds of Italian marble and fine china became a shield as he rolled behind it, dragging an Iho down by her wrist. The second shot punched through where his head had been 3 seconds earlier, embedding in the mahogany paneling behind the bar. Then all hell broke loose. The man at the bar drew a Glock from his shoulder holster. The kitchen team moved with coordinated precision, weapons materializing from jacket holsters as diners screamed and scattered. I dropped my tray, the crystal shattering into 1,000 fragments that sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Mark had an Iho pressed against the floor, one hand covering her mouth, the other holding a compact pistol I hadn't seen him draw. His eyes found mine across the chaos, and in that split second of connection, an entire conversation happened without words. You knew. You warned me. You're in this now. I nodded once. He nodded back. Then he fired 3 shots toward the kitchen team with the calm precision of a man who'd done this before, and the restaurant transformed from Manhattan's finest dining into a war zone where the only currency that mattered was survival. Mark's bodyguards were already down. I saw them as I moved. One slumped against the bar with a red bloom spreading across his white shirt, another face down near the entrance, his weapons still holstered. They'd been neutralized before the first shot ever shattered the glass. This wasn't an ambush. It was an execution planned down to the second. Move! I grabbed Mark's arm, hauling him toward the kitchen. An Iho screamed something in Mandarin, reaching for him. But he shook her off with the cold efficiency of a man who just watched his future wife try to murder him. Bullets chewed through the mahogany paneling behind us. I kept low, using overturned tables as cover, my body remembering movements I'd drilled 1,000 times in another life. Mark matched my pace, his breathing controlled despite the chaos. Whatever else he was, the man knew how to move under fire. We hit the kitchen at a full sprint. Chefs scattered, pans clattered to the tile floor. Someone shouted in Spanish. I didn't slow down. Straight through the prep line, past the walk-in freezer, through the service exit that opened onto the alley behind the building. The February air hit like a slap. Rain came down in sheets, turning the alley into a river of garbage and neon reflections. Where's your car? Mark's voice was steady, but I caught the tight edge of pain underneath. Don't have one. I scanned the alley. 3 vehicles, a catering van, a BMW sedan with diplomatic plates, and a black Audi RS7 that screamed money and speed. I moved toward the Audi. That's not yours. It is now. I smashed the driver's window with my elbow, ignoring the alarm that screamed into the night. 12 seconds to pop the steering column, find the ignition wires. My fingers worked on muscle memory, twisting and stripping copper like I was back in Sao Paulo, 16 years old and stealing cars for the local gang before the military gave me a better option. The engine roared to life. Get in! Mark dove into the passenger seat as gunfire erupted from the kitchen exit. I punched the accelerator, the Audi's all-wheel drive finding traction on wet asphalt as we rocketed out of the alley onto 8th Avenue. Behind us, a black SUV peeled out in pursuit. You're bleeding. I kept my eyes on the road, weaving through late-night traffic with the precision of someone who'd run convoy security in hostile territory. Graze. Mark pressed his palm against his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark against the white of his shirt. Hold pressure. I cut across 2 lanes, ignoring the horn blasts and middle fingers. The SUV stayed on us, closing distance. Glove box. Should be a first aid kit. He found it, standard German emergency kit, nothing fancy. I guided him through it while taking a hard right onto 57th. The Audi's suspension absorbing the turn like water. Gauze pad. Press it directly on the wound. Hard as you can stand. Mark followed instructions without complaint, his face pale but focused. You're not a waiter. Tonight, I'm a driver. I checked the mirror. The SUV was gaining. Hold on. I killed the lights and yanked the emergency brake, spinning the Audi 180 degrees in the middle of the intersection. The SUV shot past us, brake lights flaring too late. I punched the accelerator again, heading the opposite direction, and disappeared into the maze of Manhattan's side streets where shadows swallowed us whole. The safe house in Queens was the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. A brick row house squeezed between a laundromat and a bodega, bars on the windows, graffiti on the stoop. Mark directed me through back streets until we pulled into a narrow garage that smelled like motor oil and rust. The door rolled down behind us with mechanical finality, sealing us in. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, broken only by our breathing and the tick of cooling metal. When I turned, Mark had a Sig Sauer pointed at my chest. Who are you? His voice was flat, empty of the civility he'd worn in the restaurant. This was the real Mark Snyder, the one who'd built an empire on violence and leverage. The one who didn't leave loose ends breathing. I kept my hands visible on the steering wheel. Arthur Santos Mello, like the name tag said. Waiters don't drive like you just drove. They don't hotwire high-end vehicles in 12 seconds. They don't give tactical medical instruction while executing counter-surveillance maneuvers. He shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. So I'll ask again. Who are you? The barrel of the Sig never wavered. I'd been on both ends of interrogations before. I knew when someone was bluffing and when they were ready to pull the trigger. Mark was 3 seconds from painting the Audi's interior with my brains. "Bope," I said quietly. "Brazilian Special Police Operations Battalion. 7 years. Favela operations, counter-narcotics, high-value target extraction." I met his eyes. "I left in 2019. Came to the States on a tourist visa that expired 2 years ago. Been washing dishes and serving rich people wine ever since." "Why'd you leave?" "Because my commander ordered me to execute a 14-year-old kid who'd been forced to run drugs for the cartels. I refused. He put it in my file that I was unstable, unsuitable for continued service." The memory tasted like copper. I had a choice. Take a dishonorable discharge or disappear. I disappeared. Mark's gun lowered an inch. "Not much, but enough. Why help me? You could have walked away. Let it happen. Stayed invisible. I hate traitors." The words came out harder than I intended. "Whatever you are, whatever you've done, you didn't deserve to die eating creme brulee while the woman you trusted put a bullet in your skull." I gestured to his shoulder. "And that needs proper stitches. I can do it, but we need supplies." Mark studied me for a long moment, the gun still pointed at my center mass, his eyes calculating probabilities and risks. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. 7 years BOP. Combat medic certified. Speaks Mandarin well enough to understand a hit order. He set the SIG on the dashboard between us, a gesture that was part olive branch, part test. "You know what you are, Arthur? Unemployed. You're exactly what I've been missing." Mark leaned back, his face pale but his voice gaining strength. "Someone invisible. Someone nobody sees coming. Someone who can move through their world without triggering alarms." He pressed the gauze tighter to his shoulder, blood soaking through. "How'd you like to stop being a waiter and start being useful again?" I looked at the gun on the dashboard, at the man who'd just survived his own execution, at the path I'd chosen the moment I slipped that napkin under his wine glass. "What did you have in mind?" The news broke at 6 a.m. I watched it on the safe house television while Mark slept off the painkillers I'd given him after stitching his shoulder. 17 sutures, neat and functional, the muscle damage minimal. He'd gotten lucky. The anchor wore the practiced solemnity of someone reporting tragedy. Manhattan crime boss Mark Snyder is presumed dead following a shooting at the Onyx Room last night. Sources say multiple bodies were recovered from the scene. Snyder's fiancée, Ho, survived the attack and has assumed control of his organization during this difficult transition. I watched Ho on the screen, standing outside a townhouse in Tribeca, dressed in black, her face a perfect mask of grief. She dabbed at dry eyes with a handkerchief while reporters shouted questions. "Mark was my everything," she said, her voice breaking at precisely the right moment. "I'll honor his legacy by protecting what he built." "She's good," Mark said from the doorway. He'd changed into clean clothes I'd found in the safe house. Jeans and a black shirt that made him look more dangerous than any tailored suit ever could. "She's been planning this for months." "You suspected?" "I suspected someone in my organization was selling information to the triads. I didn't think it was her." He moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight lines. "She played me perfectly. The romance, the engagement, the pillow talk about expanding into new territories." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I told her everything." I poured coffee from the pot I'd made, handed him a cup. "So what's the play? You're going to do what you do best. Be invisible." Mark took the coffee, drank it black. "Walk the streets. Listen. Find out who she's working with, what the hierarchy looks like, where they're vulnerable." He met my eyes. "Can you do that?" "I've been invisible my whole life." 3 days later, I stood outside a dim sum restaurant in Chinatown, wearing a delivery driver's jacket I'd bought at a thrift store for $8. The jacket made me a ghost. People looked through delivery drivers the same way they looked through waiters, janitors, taxi drivers. We were the infrastructure of the city, necessary but unworthy of notice. Ho arrived in a black Mercedes at 2 p.m., flanked by bodyguards who scanned the street with professional paranoia. They didn't see me loading boxes onto a hand truck 20 feet away. She went inside. I waited. 15 minutes later, a second car pulled up. This one had diplomatic plates and tinted windows. The man who emerged wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the car. He was mid-50s, Chinese, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd survived decades in a business where mistakes were fatal. I recognized him from the briefing materials Mark had shown me. Chun Wei, lieutenant in the Red Dragon Triad, the largest Chinese organized crime syndicate on the East Coast. The man who'd been trying to muscle into Mark's territory for years. The man I-Ho had sold out to. Chun entered the restaurant without his bodyguards, which told me everything. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a partnership meeting. Two allies discussing the spoils of a successful coup. I pulled out my phone, snapped 3 photos as Chen's car idled at the curb, then loaded the last box onto my truck and walked away. Just another delivery driver finishing his route, invisible and forgettable. Mark was right. I'd spent 7 years in BOP learning to kick down doors and win firefights. But the most valuable skill I'd ever learned was how to disappear in plain sight. And now I was going to use it to bring down the woman who'd tried to kill the only man in this city who'd seen me as more than a ghost. The cash house sat in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. From the outside it looked abandoned, graffitied walls, broken windows, the kind of place urban explorers photographed for Instagram. From the inside, it processed $2 million a week in cash from Mark's protection rackets, gambling operations, and loan sharking enterprises. Or it used to before I-Ho took over. For guards, Mark said, studying the blueprint we'd spread across the safe house table. 2 at the front entrance, 1 roaming patrol, 1 in the counting room on the 2nd floor. Plus whoever's doing the actual counting. I traced the entry points with my finger. Service entrance here, fire escape here. They'll have cameras, probably motion sensors after business hours. We go in at 4 a.m. Shift change. They'll be tired, distracted. Mark looked at me across the table. You've done building clearance before? More times than I can count. I met his eyes. But I need to know. Are we there to send a message or gather intelligence? Both. Mark's smile was cold. We take the ledgers, whatever records they're keeping. And we make sure I-Ho knows I'm still breathing. We hit the warehouse at 0347 hours. I wore black tactical gear Mark had pulled from a storage locker. Plate carrier, suppressed Glock 19. The familiar weight of a combat loadout settling over me like an old skin I'd almost forgotten. Mark moved beside me. His shoulders still healing but his movements sharp and practiced. The service entrance gave us exactly 8 seconds before the motion sensor would trigger. I defeated the lock in 5, and we were inside, swallowed by darkness and the chemical smell of currency being counted and bundled. The first guard never saw us. I came around the corner low and fast, put him on the ground with a rear naked choke that cut blood flow to his brain. He went limp in 7 seconds. Unconscious, not dead. I wasn't that person anymore. Mark raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The second guard was smoking by the loading dock, his back to us. Mark handled him with brutal efficiency. Pistol whip to the temple, plastic zip ties around the wrists. Professional work from a man who'd clearly done this before his empire got big enough to hire people for it. We moved up the stairs like water, silent and inevitable. The counting room door was steel reinforced, but the walls were drywall. I put 3 suppressed rounds through the wall at knee height. Someone inside screamed. The door opened. I went through first, weapon up, scanning corners and clearing angles with the muscle memory of 1,000 training iterations. 2 men on the floor, one clutching his leg, the other with his hands raised. Neither was armed. Behind them, a desk covered in banded cash and 3 leather ledgers. Clear, I called. Mark entered, picked up the first ledger, started flipping pages. His expression darkened with each entry. She's been skimming for 18 months. 5% off every collection, rerouted through shell companies. He looked at the wounded man. Where does the money go? The man spat blood. Go to hell. I pressed my boot against his gunshot wound. Not hard, just a reminder. He asked you a question. Hong Kong. Accounts in Hong Kong. Chun Wei handles the transfers. Mark photographed every page of every ledger with methodical precision. Evidence. Proof. Ammunition for the war that was coming. We were gone before the police arrived, melting back into the pre-dawn darkness of Brooklyn, leaving behind zip-tied guards and the smoking ruins of NIHO's credibility. In the car, Mark looked at me differently than he had before. Not as a useful asset, as an equal. Where'd you learn to move like that? Rocinha Favela, 2015. We cleared 30 buildings in 4 days. I kept my eyes on the road. Lost 3 men doing it. Mark nodded slowly. I'm sorry I pointed a gun at you. You were right to. I glanced at him. Trust has to be earned. You've earned it. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably going to go sideways. I walked past the camera outside NIHO's penthouse building in Midtown at exactly 11:47 p.m. Face clearly visible. No attempt to hide. Just a former waiter strolling through a neighborhood where he had no business being at midnight. The bait was set. Mark would be 15 blocks south, breaking into NIHO's secondary office where she kept the offshore account records. He needed 30 minutes. My job was to buy him 40. The black SUV pulled up 6 minutes later. Professional response time. They'd been monitoring the feeds, waiting for someone to make a mistake. 3 men emerged, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a trained unit. Former military, probably. Chun Wei didn't hire amateurs. I didn't run. Running would have been suspicious. Instead, I turned down an alley like I just realized I was being followed, which gave them the opening they wanted. The first one hit me from behind, driving me face-first into brick. My vision exploded in stars and copper. They zip-tied my wrists, threw a black hood over my head, and dragged me into the SUV. Professional abduction, textbook execution. I counted turns, estimated distances, kept my breathing steady despite the hood's suffocating warmth. 23 minutes later, they pulled me out and shoved me into a chair. The hood came off. NIHO stood in front of me wearing a white silk robe that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned. We were in a penthouse somewhere in Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The luxury felt obscene after the safe house in Queens. Arthur Santos Mello. She said my name like it tasted bitter. The waiter who ruined everything. I prefer server. Blood ran from my split lip. Waiter sounds so formal. She hit me. Not hard enough to break anything, but enough to snap my head sideways. Her diamond ring opened a cut on my cheekbone. Where is he? Who? Don't be stupid. Mark. Where is Mark Snyder? I laughed, even though it hurt. You shot him through a restaurant window with a high-powered rifle. Where do you think he is? His body wasn't in the restaurant. We searched the entire building, the streets, the hospitals. She leaned close, her jasmine perfume cloying. Someone helped him escape. Someone who knew how to move under fire, how to disappear. Someone exactly like you. I'm just a waiter who got lucky. She nodded to one of the guards. He hit me in the ribs with something heavy. Baton, maybe. The pain was white-hot and absolute. I tasted blood. Last chance, Arthur. Where is Mark Snyder? I checked my watch. 28 minutes since they'd grabbed me. Mark needed 12 more. You really loved him? I asked instead. Or was it always about the money? Her face hardened. Love is a weakness men like Mark exploit. I learned that from my father before Chun Wei had him killed for being too soft. She circled behind me. Power is the only thing that matters. Mark understood that once. Then he got comfortable, sloppy, started trusting the wrong people. People like you. People exactly like me. She grabbed my hair, yanked my head back. Tell me where he is, and I'll make this quick. I met her eyes and smiled through broken teeth. He's already won. You just don't know it yet. The guard hit me again. And again. I focused on the clock on the wall, counting seconds, buying time with every moment of pain. 41 minutes. Mark had what he needed. Now I just had to survive long enough for him to use it. NIHO's patience ran out at the 53-minute mark. She nodded to the guard with the baton, and he drew a pistol instead. A Beretta 92 suppressor already attached. Professional equipment for a professional execution. You could have walked away, NIHO said, almost conversational. Gone back to serving wine, pretending to be invisible. Instead, you chose loyalty to a man you barely know. She shook her head. That's the difference between people like you and people like me. I understand that loyalty is just another transaction. The guard pressed the suppressor against my temple. The metal was cold. Final. Any last words, Arthur? I looked past her to the windows overlooking Central Park, at the city lights that had swallowed so many invisible people like me. Yeah, you should have used better security. The eastern window exploded inward in a shower of ballistic glass and repelling cable. Mark Snyder came through the opening like an avenging angel, MP5 submachine gun already firing. The guard with the Beretta took 3 rounds center mass before he could pivot. He went down in a spray of red. The second guard managed to draw his weapon. Mark put 2 in his chest, 1 in his head. Mozambique drill executed perfectly. And I-ho ran for the bedroom. Mark let her go. This wasn't about her. Not yet. He crossed to me in 3 strides, produced a tactical knife, and cut through the zip ties. Can you move? Define move. My ribs were on fire. My face felt like tenderized meat, but I got to my feet. How'd you find me? Tracker in your watch. He handed me the dead guard's Beretta. I told you trust has to be earned. I didn't say I trusted you completely. Fair enough. We made it to the hallway before Chun Wei's reinforcements arrived. 6 men pouring out of the elevator with automatic weapons. Mark and I dove in opposite directions as bullets chewed through drywall and contemporary art worth more than my life. I came up firing, dropping 1, then 2. Mark moved like liquid violence, his MP5 barking in controlled bursts. The hallway turned into a kill box, and we were the ones controlling it. But numbers matter. A round caught me in the left shoulder, spinning me around. I hit the wall hard, the Beretta clattering from my hand. Mark appeared in front of me, weapon empty, using his body as a shield. He grabbed my good arm and hauled me toward the stairwell. Stay with me. We tumbled down 3 flights of stairs, Mark half carrying me. My blood leaving a trail that would have made tracking us easy if anyone had been alive upstairs to follow. My vision tunneled, the world reducing to Mark's face and the sound of our ragged breathing. The stolen sedan was where he'd left it, engine running. He shoved me into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel. Tires screamed as we rocketed into Manhattan traffic. You came back for me? I said, pressing my hand against the shoulder wound. The bleeding was bad but manageable. You bought me 41 minutes. Mark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I've had soldiers die for me. I've had men take bullets meant for me. But I've never had someone let themselves get tortured just to buy me time. He glanced at me, something raw in his eyes. You're not just an asset, Arthur. You're my brother now. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Brothers. I'd crossed an ocean to escape my past, and somehow found a family in the last place I'd expected, in the violent world of a man who saw me when everyone else looked away. The summit took place in a waterfront warehouse in Red Hook, neutral territory where the 5 families had settled disputes for 3 generations. I watched from the catwalk above, suppressed rifle resting on the railing, my shoulders screaming under the weight of the weapon. Mark had stitched me up with the same precision I'd used on him, but painkillers only went so far. Below, the families gathered around a conference table that looked absurd in the industrial space. Mahogany and leather in a kingdom of rust and concrete. And I-ho sat at the head in a black Chanel suit, playing the grieving widow with Oscar-worthy commitment. Chun Wei stood behind her like a shadow, his triad soldiers positioned at every entrance. 4 other bosses filled the remaining seats. Salvatore Costa, Italian mob, and I-ho's nominal uncle, though the family connection was distant enough to be convenient. Yuri Volkov, Bratva, arms trafficking. James McCready, Irish, unions and construction. And David Huang, Taiwanese, who controlled the ports. We're here to formalize the transition, Salvatore said, his Brooklyn accent thick as concrete. Mark Snyder is dead, and I-ho has assumed control of his operations. The question is whether the commission recognizes her claim. She's proven herself, Chun Wei said, his English precise. The territory is stable. Revenue continues. What more do you need? Yuri lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking rule. I need to know she can handle the pressure when the feds come sniffing. Mark had relationships, history. She's new. I have Chun-Wei's full support, Ho said smoothly, and the Triad's resources. Together, we're stronger than Mark ever was alone. That's when the main door opened. Mark Snyder walked in like a resurrection, his face scarred from the breakout, his shoulder bandaged under a fresh suit, his presence filling the warehouse with the weight of inevitability. The room went silent except for Chun-Wei's guards reaching for their weapons. I put the first one down with a headshot from 60 feet. The suppressed round made a sound like a book slamming shut. The guard dropped. The second went down before anyone could locate the shooter. Panic rippled through Chen's men. I wouldn't. Mark's voice cut through the chaos. My friend upstairs has 11 rounds left and excellent marksmanship. The next person who moves wrong dies wrong. Iho's face went white, then red, then settled into something like respect mixed with rage. You're supposed to be dead. I was. Briefly. Then I decided resurrection suited me better. Mark walked to the table, pulled out a chair across from her and sat. We need to talk about your hostile takeover. Chun-Wei stepped forward. This is finished, Snyder. You're outnumbered, outgunned. And I have proof you've been working with Ho to steal from my organization for 18 months. Mark pulled out a phone, set it on the table. Recorded conversations, financial records, video evidence of your meetings. Everything the FBI would need to put both of you away for 20 years. He pressed play. Iho's voice filled the warehouse, speaking Mandarin, confirming the hit order. Then Chen's voice, discussing the division of territory, the elimination of Mark's loyalists, the plan to absorb his operations into the Triad structure. Salvatore's face darkened. You brought the Triads into commission business without approval? You tried to stage a coup, Yuri added, crushing his cigarette. That breaks every rule. Iho stood, desperate. Their lies, fabrications. I was there, Mark said quietly. So was my associate. We documented everything. He looked around the table. The question now is simple. Do we handle this internally? Or do I send this recording to the Southern District and let them handle it? Chun-Wei drew a weapon. I put a round through his hand before he could aim it. He screamed, the gun clattering to concrete. Last chance, Mark said to Iho. Confess. Face the commission's judgment. Or force me to end this the hard way. Iho looked at the faces around her. The bosses who'd turned, the guards I'd neutralized, the man she tried to kill sitting calm and unmovable across the table. I wanted what you had, she whispered. Power without apology. Respect without compromise. Everything my father died begging for. Then you should have built it yourself, Mark said. Instead of trying to steal mine. The commission voted unanimously. Exile. A mercy Iho didn't deserve but received anyway, because even criminals have rules about how power changes hands. As they led her away, she looked up at the catwalk where I'd been invisible, doing what I did best. Watching, waiting, protecting the man who'd given me purpose again. 3 days after the summit, I stood in the safe house bedroom, folding the few possessions I owned into a duffel bag that had seen better decades. 2 changes of clothes, a burner phone, the Beretta Mark had told me to keep. Everything I'd accumulated in 2 years of being invisible in America fit in 20 pounds of worn canvas. The waiter uniform from the Onyx room sat on the bed, black polyester and white shirt, cleaned and pressed out of habit. I'd worn it the night I slipped that napkin under Mark's wine glass and changed both our lives. Now it looked like a costume from someone else's story. Going somewhere? Mark stood in the doorway, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months of serving wine. His shoulder had healed clean, no infection, just a scar he'd carry as a reminder that betrayal came from the places you least expected. Job's done, I said, not looking at him. Iho's gone. You've got your empire back. I did what you hired me to do. I didn't hire you. You volunteered. He walked into the room, set a manila folder on the bed next to the uniform. And you're not done. I stared at the folder. What's this? Open it. Inside were legal documents, official stamps, the kind of paperwork that separated ghosts from citizens. A work visa in my name, legitimate and unexpiring. Immigration papers for Lucia Santos, approved for entry with her 2 children. A lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, first and last month paid. And a contract. Chief of Security. I read aloud, my voice rough. Arthur Santos Mello. Salary, benefits, legal representation. I looked up at Mark. You can't just, this costs. I can, and I did. Mark sat on the bed, picked up the waiter uniform, studied it like an artifact. You know what I learned from Aniho? That the people closest to you are either your greatest strength or your fatal weakness. There's no middle ground. He met my eyes. I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who's proven they'd rather bleed than betray. Someone invisible who sees everything. I'm not a bodyguard. I'm not a soldier anymore. You're whatever you choose to be. But if you walk out that door, you go back to being nobody. Invisible for all the wrong reasons. He stood, extended his hand. Stay. Be visible. Be family. I looked at his hand, at the contract, at the future I'd stopped believing I deserved somewhere between Sao Paulo and a Queen's safe house. Then I shook it. Mark smiled, genuine for maybe the first time since I'd met him. There's one more thing in the closet. I opened the door. Inside hung a charcoal suit, tailored to my measurements, next to 3 pressed white shirts and a selection of ties I'd never worn in my life. You can't meet with the families looking like a waiter, Mark said. They need to see you as what you are. My right hand, my most trusted advisor. The man who stands in the shadows and makes sure I survive to see tomorrow. I ran my fingers over the suit fabric, expensive and foreign and mine. I don't know how to be that person. You already are that person. You just need better clothes. 2 hours later, I stood in front of a mirror in a bathroom I'd used to stitch wounds and plan operations. The suit fit perfectly, transforming the invisible waiter into someone who commanded rooms just by entering them. The scar on my shoulder was hidden. The bruises from Aniho's interrogation had faded. What remained was a man who'd chosen loyalty over safety, brotherhood over invisibility. Mark appeared in the mirror behind me, adjusting his own tie. Ready. I thought about Lucia finally able to come to America legally. I thought about the 14-year-old kid I'd refused to execute, the choice that had cost me everything and led me here. I thought about the napkin I'd slid under a wine glass, the moment I'd stopped being invisible and started being alive. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. We walked out together, leaving the waiter's uniform behind, stepping into a world where I was finally seen. Not as a ghost, but as Arthur Santos Mello, the man who'd saved a king and earned a throne of his own.
Thank you for spending your time with me. It genuinely means a lot. If you want more content like this, like the video, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. And tell me in the comments, what part was your favorite? I'll see you in the next one.